Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd, where we foster confessional integrity, liturgical preservation, and preaching that doesn't stink. We believe that the historic liturgy of the divine service is more than mere cobwebs of antiquity, but it is a true treasure of the Church, to be dusted off and brought down from her attic to be enjoyed. So let's get dusting.
Welcome back to the Gottesdienst crowd. This is Jason Broughton. Today we have back with us Dave Peterson. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We are looking at the Gospel reading for the 15th Sunday after Trinity. It comes from Matthew chapter 6, verses 24 to 34. I will read that in the New King James. Jesus said, "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air, for they neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? Which of you, by worrying, can add 1 cubit to his stature? So why do you worry about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. And yet I say to you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Now if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Therefore do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For after all these things the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble." Okay, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is often expounding upon the 10 Commandments. Does this fall under the 9th and 10th, the coveting?
Yeah, I would think so. Mm-hmm. I mean, so I have some Bible passages about worry that kind of seems to be related. Luke 12, Jesus says, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." Matthew 10 brings up the sparrows again, right? They're sold for a copper coin. Not one of them falls to the ground apart from your Father's will. And then Philippians 4, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." The coveting, coveting is sort of a better word than worry in terms of getting at the sort of problematic reality, because there is a sort of potential positive side of worry. I mean, it's not as though Jesus is saying, you don't need to eat or drink, you don't need to work. Like, look at the flowers. They don't work. It's fine for them. You should quit working, right? That's not the point. The point here is the anxiety and the false trust that's put in our efforts.
Yeah, it's
right?
Like undue care for.
Yeah.
How does Aquinas distinguish, or maybe Augustine distinguishes between it's like misordered love is lust, or misordered desires. It's an ordering that is wrong.
Right. There's a sadness in this. So I think that's from memory, but I think that's the way Aquinas goes, that this is not simply concern for the future, that is laying aside provisions for your family in a way that's appropriate and hopeful, but a way that is somehow inflicted with a sadness, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's that kind of gets at what Luther kind of talks about in his long sermons on the Sermon on the Mount. Each day brings its own cares. Why add those of tomorrow to it?
Right.
That worrying about tomorrow is the way Luther talks about it in those long sermons, is unbelief twice over.
Nice.
It's despising today's provision and distrusting in tomorrow's.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. I mean,
And,
I was thinking,
in a sense, it also keeps you from, well, one, delighting in today's
right.
provision, and then also taking care of the things that you should be caring for today.
Right. And even proper care for tomorrow, right? The appropriate care for tomorrow.
Yeah.
As well, because you've been, right, because you're in this anxiety state where you're giving it the wrong kind of attention. Yeah. I always love this idea from Marcus Aurelius that we suffer more in our imaginations.
There we go.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious what you think. Jesus uses not bios here for life.
Right,
He uses CK.
Yeah.
Do you think that a lot of our troubles around this are because we tend to be materialists in the sense that we think that life only consists in bios?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I think that's kind of a Greek problem.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, this is sort of this idea of, the kingdom doesn't come with observation. Mm-hmm. And, yeah. So I now think on this, when the Greeks say we would see Jesus, I think when Jesus says, he says, no, you can't see me because you were looking for the wrong thing and you're not listening. You have to see with the ears. So this whole idea of the kingdom not coming with observation, I think, is kind of anti-scientific. I mean, not completely. I mean, but you know what I mean, is that we over-rely upon observation.
Yeah, it's beyond scientific.
Yeah, it's
people will say it's irrational. No, it's not contrary to rationality. It's beyond our rationality.
Right. It's recognizing our limits and trusting in what's actually eternal and trustworthy. So yeah, I think that this it does use the word. I don't know, how much you can make over the distinction in this context between suke and bios, but I mean that's just the word that suke is usually translated soul or breath, right? But it does mean life, and then bios means life also, but is usually more about the concrete physical life. So. Whether or not, you don't need vocab to make this argument, but it could be that the nuance there is being played upon that we shouldn't be just thinking about staying alive, right? In terms of staying alive physically.
Yeah, my question then is CK bios plus, or is it drawing a distinction, this is a different kind of life, do you think?
Yeah, I think he's trying to draw us to the reality that we are going to die and there's a way to live, right? So what actually matters is how you live, how you die, and the sort of life to come. Mm-hmm. So there is something that's more. I mean, even the Greeks do recognize this at their best, right?
Yeah. Well, this is a poignant lesson in light of, the assassination of Charlie Kirk and all of that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, just in terms of how often do we weigh what we will say or do because we're afraid of how it will be received and what they will do to us.
Yeah.
I mean, in that sense, what Kirk did was, really quite remarkable in terms of actually going and trying to have these conversations with people.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, even short of being shot, which, was kind of almost unimaginable. But I mean, even barring that, which I think was kind of hard to foresee, he suffered an awful lot of slander and people hated him. I mean, obviously. And so, I mean, he was willing to endure. I think that's, I totally believe and commend him for being willing to die. But I actually think it's sort of almost easier to be willing to die than to endure what he endured for years. The kind of hatred and the slander and the awkwardness and the discomfort that he engaged in, for the sake of actually saying the truth, for the sake of those who wouldn't hear him in many cases, right? I think the long trudge was, anyway.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you here on this. I think that his unwillingness to be moved by that long suffering of slander brought us to that inevitable conclusion.
Yeah. No,
in some ways, the way Jesus himself, right?
Yeah.
Or, all of those who suffer for the kingdom, the temptation is we endure that kind of pain, and so we back off, and it did what it was supposed to do. And so instead, it didn't do, and so the only thing left is actual violence.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we can't argue with him. We can't win an argument with him. He's too persuasive. He's got the facts. We just have to kill him. And, they're so convinced they're right, apart from the facts, that they think this is just.
I know.
And,
that's John 15, too.
It is. I know.
And 16.
and totally self-righteous in it, right?
Yeah.
Because, they're so convinced that they can't be wrong, that they are good, and they can't examine that with any kind of actual. So it just reach out in violence and be proud of it. It's. I know it's outrageous, but I think that's exactly what happened.
So does Jesus here have in mind more than just biological cares that we will put our efforts into and worry about? Does he have other cares in mind? He doesn't really bring it up. Maybe those are the most accessible, the worrying about money, the worrying about clothing and food and those sorts of things. But is there something else that, obviously we are subject to those same kinds of cares and worries and anxieties of mammon. But does he have other kinds of things that we are also worried about? Mind?
I think it's it's an argument from he's going for kind of right. The point would be is that if you shouldn't worry about staying alive, right, in this life, then, you really shouldn't worry about whether or not, the grocery store clerk likes you or not. You shouldn't be worried about the opinions of men. You shouldn't be worried about if you have enough luxuries. I think it's kind of a Maslow's pyramid sort of thing. He's gone right to the bottom of the pyramid and said, okay, don't worry about this. Obviously, nothing less significant than this is worth your concern then. Mm-hmm. Right? I think in the sense of this is saying these are the most important things there would be. And I think that's fair. Even, there is a sense in which the fifth commandment is dealing with kind of, in some ways, the most critical thing, right? Outside of faith itself. And bodily life is probably the second most important thing in the world, in a sense, right?
Our understanding of things.
Right. There is a hierarchy, sure. Right? It is worse to murder someone than to steal from him. It is worse to, do things to people in their bodies than call them names. But, that's not to say calling them names is okay. So I do think when he goes for this, these things that if you don't have clothing and shelter and food, you're dead. So, but I'm telling you, don't worry about that, because there's things more important than staying alive. And if there's things more important than staying alive, then there's certainly things more important than being popular or having luxuries or having, right? The other things you're worrying about are obviously petty anyway, because you're not worrying about starving.
Yeah. Right? Do you think that his appeal to Solomon and all of his glory gets into that? Like reputation, his fame, how people thought of him?
I never thought of that. Go on.
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of, the lilies of the field are arrayed more gloriously in appearance and in all of these things than Solomon ever was. And how was Solomon arrayed? Yes, he had fine clothing, he had riches, and he had wealth, but he also had like fame and great reputation.
Yeah.
He was looked up to. And what do we do to the lilies? We look down on them. So I wonder if there's something there that kind of brings that in.
I've always read that as differently than that. I've seen it as, Solomon had all of the resources of the world, right?
Yeah.
And his efforts at beauty couldn't compare to a field that's mown down. That there is a beauty in creation that surpasses all human efforts. And the things that we're actually kind of impressed by are fleeting. And I don't know. I
think that can dovetail with what you said. He's saying Jesus is trying to get us to look past what we prize.
Right. Well, and so we shouldn't try to stay alive at all costs. Mm-hmm. Right. There's things worth dying for. That's sort of part one, I think. But then,
have you ever preached that? On this text, there are things worth dying for.
I think so. I've certainly preached that. I don't know if I preached it on this text. I preached it a lot. I preached that a lot during COVID.
Yes, I bet
we all did. But I think that's the point here. There's things worth starving for. Things worse than starving. How's that? Mm-hmm. Things to be avoided. There's that sort of thing.
And we're not starving.
And we're not starving. That's the thing too, right? We're not worried about starving. We're worried that the food won't be delicious.
Right.
Which is so.
It does make it better, though.
This isn't the most delicious thing I ever had. How can I tolerate this? This food is so boring. It's so shameful that we would be so driven by pleasure.
Yeah.
But we are. Yeah.
Lauren recently was making, I think, a pork loin for me and for everyone. And I think she got distracted, and so it got, a little dry. And she was like so apologetic. And I said, well, it's still going to fill me. And she goes, I know, but you look forward to this. And so it was very sweet on her part. But I think that gets at your point. We're not starving. That's still edible.
Right. And by the way, we could probably skip it and we still wouldn't starve, right? We're not close to the edge of starvation.
Right.
Even in our fasting, we don't really, well, at least I don't, and I don't think there's too many of us listening to this that actually fast to the point of danger. Right. You might feel a little lightheaded. That's about it. That's there's a pain in my belly. I'm a little lightheaded, and I haven't had a ton of pleasure today. You poor thing. So,
bless your heart.
I was going to say something else. I forgot what it was, but I think this whole relationship. Oh, the mammon thing. I think we should just to start right there. You have this really kind of, it's a figure of speech here where mammon is treated like a person, as though mammon is the master. Mm-hmm. But obviously mammon is inanimate. It has no will. It doesn't master anyone. The real problem is, we're actually being ruled by our passions. And, it's greed, it's desire for pleasure, it's, concern for the good opinion of men. It's the desire to avoid hard things. That's what's actually ruling us. Money, is only a tool, and it's, from an eternal point of view, it's completely worthless. It's like the lilies of the field. If you had a whole bunch of the denarii, they wouldn't be worth very much. Mm-hmm. It's temporary. Our money's really worthless, right? It has nothing behind it. It's just a piece of paper with the government's promise on it.
Right.
Yeah.
So what Jesus is doing here is saying what you have care for and worry about is what you're actually seeking after.
Yeah.
And the things
what's
we
ruling
should be seeking after are other things.
Well, you're right. And you're being controlled. I mean, you don't even realize it. You're a slave and you don't know it.
Yeah.
Right. You have a master, and it's not your own will or your own intellect. It's this ambiguous thing, and when you see it, it's embarrassing. Think of all of these ancient tales about greediness are interesting. It's so easy to see it in other people. It's so obvious. The guy that I can't. I should have prepared for this. I didn't. I mean, this part of it. Who's the guy in? Oh, geez, I can't even think of it. Is it where? I can't even think of the. Is it where's the labyrinth? Is that in Crete? That's not in Crete.
Oh well. You're like Minos?
Yeah.
King Minos?
King Minos, yeah. Well, anyway, right? Like you see these guys that are, so obsessed with all of these sorts of riches and the ways that they just make such foolish decisions and destroy everything in their paths. And, it's this cautionary tale that even the pagans can recognize. And it does seem to me that is a kind of like, it's almost like the modern pagans have gotten over it. And they don't mind obscene, like these yachts and things, right? Epstein and these people, and the way that they're living, and they're unashamed of it. Mm-hmm. I can't really you wouldn't have walked around in Sparta like that, right? You weren't allowed to. Mm-hmm. A little bit in Athens, but even there, you probably they wouldn't have tolerated that. Yeah. This kind of it's insane, and. Now I know this sort of, sounds like communism. I don't mean to go to that extreme, but I do think that there is a kind of humility and recognition that there is a time when enough is enough. And I mean, I have always sort of been impressed by, the Carnegies, giving away their money. I mean, maybe it's a little late, but, they give away their money and they require that it be spent. They don't want there to be a foundation that earns interest and keeps on making men powerful. Mm. So all those libraries are built and then the money's gone. I don't know. I think there was, there's something in there that they recognized the problem of having money. So. Yeah.
Well, I do know that whenever I've had to get a new car, I feel weird pulling into the church parking lot or anything like that. Because I know people are going to ask about it, and it's never actually brand new, but
right. Well, I mean, we got to find a healthy balance here. There's right. I mean, there's a time to have the fancy anointing oil and be unashamed of it. There's a time to feast. Mm-hmm. But there is a kind of excess in our world that is celebrated, mm-hmm. and. I even I don't really follow this very closely, but there was some giant lottery Powerball thing recently that was the biggest ever or something. It seems like they're always saying that, but it just doesn't. There's just something unseemly about it, and then the sort of fantasies that it sends people into, I think, are unhealthy as well. Mm-hmm. What they would do if they won all this money. We know that if the history is any predictor of what they'll do is destroy themselves very quickly. Mm-hmm. But that's never in the daydreams. And it also turns out that most people, no matter how well educated and wise, are willing to risk it. Right. That is really to our shame that we think that we want it, and we just sort of think of all the good we would do with it. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a kind of call here to, why don't you do good with what you got? And why don't you get to work instead of, I think it's a kind of satanic impulse that makes us think that if we can't do something hugely significant, it's not worth anything. Mm. So, contrary to the widow's mite, Jesus is impressed with the widow's mite.
Yeah, there's a there is a tendency for us to set aside what can be done today with what we have and use our agency for good in that regard. And instead, we need this in place, that in place in order to make sure that but then we never work towards getting those things in place.
Right.
And so we end up in those daydreams.
Yeah. You got a funny thing in verse 26, I think, because, of course, birds die all the time. And in that other quote, right, sparrows fall from the sky.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a funny, it's not like he picks something eternal. Look at the mountains, nothing erodes them. No, he goes for this like weakest of things, right? Look at the birds, look at the flowers, the birds that live, for 3 months and then die, or who are so easily killed by, whatever, to a strong wind, all kinds of predators. Look, your Father takes care of them. And, I think kind of you got to be thinking in your back of the mind, well, is that how we want to be taken care of?
Well, he is holding it up as the thing to be.
Yes. No, I think that's the whole point is that he's not saying, look, trust in me and everything will be great.
Right.
He's saying, first of all, you don't actually have, now this is going to sound anti-goddess. You don't actually have that much agency. Your schemes, your mammon, your plans are just no guarantee of anything. Mm-hmm. And, you can't add a cubit to your length of life by worrying. And you can be the most competent, richest person in the world, but you're easy to kill. All of us are. And you're not really any more secure in this physical life than a sparrow or a lily.
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't take much, right? Fall off a chair, hit your head, die. That's so the thing is he's not saying to here's the solution on how to get rich or how to be happy and so forth. He's saying he's calling us to learn to live contentedly with confidence that he is good and he knows what he's doing, right? Mm-hmm. And that nothing is really happening by accident. Again, not calling us, so the sort of passages that call us to work, right? 1 Thessalonians 2, remember, brethren, our labor and toil, for laboring day and night, that we might not be a burden to any of you. We preach to you the gospel of God, right? Paul is laboring. He's not just, drinking beer in Wittenberg and God takes care of it all.
Yeah.
And
so do you think in some ways Jesus is saying, don't just play it safe?
Oh, interesting.
So there's, I got this, I follow this guy named Chris Voss. He's former FBI negotiator, and he wrote this book called Never Split the Difference. And I get his emails periodically and often read them, but sometimes don't. But I had read this one, and it begins, he says, I know a man who made an unusual decision one morning. He chose to fail. He literally asked himself, what am I going to fail at today? And he picked 5 things. 5 deliberate shots he knew might not land. And at the end of each day, he'd write down what he learned from each failure. Not wins, not false positive, just raw lessons from falling flat. And he says, well, today, he's the biggest winner, blah, blah, blah. But he says, most people avoid failure like it's radioactive. They fear how it looks and feels and how it makes them seem. But avoiding failure is just another way of avoiding growth.
Yeah, I think that's well said. We had one of our elders runs ultra marathons, and he gave 100 miles. And he gave a speech to our men's group last week, really well done, on how to prepare and run 100 miles. And he started out with, why would you do this in the first place? And the reasons are all the right reasons, to challenge yourself, to do something hard, to overcome an obstacle, to push the limits, right? But he talked about the part of the preparation for this is like things going wrong so that you know how to deal with it in the actual race, and entering into a race that you can't finish to find out what stopped you. And it was the same sort of thing. It's not that your intention exactly is to fail. It's your willingness to try and fail and then not quit.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm really enjoying this. There's a song on country radio right now. I can't. That's two guys I really like, Luke Combs and this other guy. I forgot his name, but it's something about your only backup plan is to get back up. Have you heard this song?
I probably have, but
it's just, typical kind of country music, macho stuff. But, I like that. And that's fun at times. But I love this kind of sentiment, right? In other words, you're not going to back down. You're going to get back up. So it's not, the backup plan isn't give up on your dream and do something else. Okay. I mean, I know this is sort of whatever, pop psychology, cliche, motivation, locker room stuff. But I think that's I was thinking of that when he was talking the other night. He had some failures along the way, but he learned from them and he grew from them, and then he knew what to do next time. And it's one thing to sort of read it in a book about how to prepare for a 100-mile race. It's another thing to actually do it and experience it. What are you going to do when you get blisters? What are you going to do when you start vomiting? What are you going to do when you start hallucinating? How are you going to respond to these things? And if you've never seen them before, the first time they might stop you, so that get back up thing, I think is huge. This is what goes wrong so often in holy marriage. I mean, people just quit too easy. Well, and in the ministry too. I mean, This is the advice I give to guys all the time. Probably a good thing I didn't get elected district president. I would have had to be the bad guy on that stuff. I always tell pastors, don't quit. It's really hard to remove a pastor in our context from his office. I mean, even when they need to be removed, it's really hard because the rules are written such that, they have to have a clear, usually a 2/3 majority and multiple meetings, and the people are pious and they don't like voting against the pastor. So it's hard, even the most antagonistic congregation, in the synod, it's hard to get them actually to that point. Usually it almost never happens that the pastor's actually voted out. Usually he quits because they've made it miserable for him. They stop paying him and they treat him terribly and he gets so stressed out he can't handle it. And I get that, and I'm sympathetic, and I'm not, look, I haven't been there, I haven't endured that. But I'm just noticing that if the guy can suffer it for a while and not quit, he will probably outlive them. Now, maybe he can't afford to outlive that, but there is this kind of quitting because things are hard. And if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. Okay. But that congregation then is not going to get better ever. So, if they succeed in driving you out, then they're not going to improve. So if we can do it, if we can endure it and we can suffer it, then we can change those congregations, and they can. So anyway, the quitting thing, and in marriage, it's even worse. In some ways, the stakes are higher, right? That all marriages go through seasons where it's unhappy, and maybe worse than unhappy, but there are seasons where times are hard, they're difficult, where husbands and wives don't like each other very much, or when they're recovering from various tragedies and difficulties. And again, sometimes the desire to just be free of this is so great that people quit. And the problem is, once you quit, there's kind of no going back. I always tell people, well, you can stop being married, but you can't stop being divorced. You kind of have to live with that the rest of your life. You've got custody battles and issues. You've got legal kind of realities. I mean, I'm not saying people can't recover from it and God doesn't bless them, or that people, you're not, it only takes one person to get divorced. And so, there's plenty of victims of this. I'm not saying everybody that's divorced is a quitter, but somebody quit, and it's devastating. So anyway, I think we just do quit too much in life. And I don't mean, 100-mile races. I mean things that are actually far more significant. Marriages, the ministry, our children, that kind of thing.
What angle for idolatry and worship do we see in this text in terms of, he says, serving, devoting?
Yeah. Well, I mean, mammon's the obvious, right? This is the big enemy here. And then along with mammon, the sort of obsessions. So you brought up that, I can't remember what you were quoting, but like I have on here, right? We're not supposed to obsess and ruminate on things that we can't control. Mm-hmm. So we're not supposed to actually obsess and ruminate about the past. Mm-hmm. And there's a temptation to do that, to sort of let that root of bitterness grow in us by just, even if it was, sometimes we have actually suffered grave injustices and tragedies in our lives. And if we just can't let go of that and we just think about it all the time and obsess about it and won't allow God to have it and move on, the root of bitterness will grow in us. And even though it might be that what we wanted at one point was justice, there comes a point when it's not justice anymore, it's vengeance, and it's a refusal to let go and to trust God and to let vengeance be his, right? And that'll destroy a man. Here we're talking more about the kind of future obsession, right? An inordinate fear or concern about the future that's tinged by sadness, right? And again, we can sort of obsess. The Charlie Kirk thing it's a horrific tragedy, and it's going to take us time to sort of come to grips with it. But we do believe that he lives, right? I mean, he made a good confession, and God be praised, for him to die is gain. Now, I mean, we're heartbroken for his family. We're heartbroken for our country that such kind of wickedness and violence can even happen. And I hope there will be justice there. But at the same time, we have to recognize that God is working all things together for good, right? And we cannot control the future. We can become very obsessed with security precautions. Yeah. Maybe we should maybe we shouldn't let visitors come to church. Maybe we should. I mean, people don't really say that, but I mean, there can be this kind of lockdown where we're more concerned about safety than anything else. And
reliving 2020.
Yeah, reliving 2020. Are we gonna be silent so that we don't get shot? Are we going to lock our churches or hide our teachings so that we don't offend the world? Are we going to, are we going to live public lives or not?
So what's the distinction between, say, obsessing over the past and analyzing it? Or do we just say analyzing in order to feed our obsessions?
Right. I think we do that a lot. I mean,
when do we know that we've crossed the line from analysis in order to perhaps not make the same mistake again into obsession?
It's difficult to tell, but I would say one thing would be, how much time are we dwelling on it?
Yeah.
Other thing. So first of all, I mean, if you're still thinking about something that happened a year ago every day, depending on how big a deal it was, that's probably too much. And if it's more than a year ago, we do need to this sounds like we need to hand things over to God. We need to trust in him and believe that he's good and that he'll take care of us and that he knows how we were wronged and he will satisfy it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so how the kind of quantity of thinking about things in the past that can't be changed is a big indicator that we're obsessing, I think. But then I think also, we can take a look at our emotions with it too, right? When we start thinking about these things again, how do we feel? And, if we're filled with rage, that's a good sign that we're obsessing and it's not actually productive. Mm-hmm. To a lesser degree, I would say sadness. I mean, that sadness is a little more appropriate for some of these things. But again, we do need to learn to kind of hand them over. Mm-hmm. And, it does take time. And So I've seen some stuff, and this does seem accurate to me. I said a year. I'm going to modify that now because I was thinking about Mrs. Kirk and what she's enduring right now. And a year is probably not enough time. But I have seen several things in kind of like pop psychology stuff that say 3 years is almost like magic, in that once you live with something for 3 years, you get very used to it. And I have seen this in my own life, and I have seen this in the lives of my members, widows, and so forth. And I don't mean to say that, and it's not, like to the day or the minute, but there does really seem to be kind of a shift that after 3 years, there does seem to be a kind of acceptance and peace that comes with it. I don't have any Bible passages to back that up. That's just anecdotal. But, it probably depends, too, on when your husband's been murdered, that's a whole lot more difficult and painful to get over than, somebody snubbed you at the party. And so, I think that's got to come into it, the degree and the gravity of what was done to you, the level of kind of misjustice that you suffered. I hear a lot of times, and I think that would be the final thing I'll say on this, we still talk about it, but I think that we ought to be able to do some analysis of whether or not our kind of concern about this thing that happened in the past really is fitting for the level of the offense. When I'm still mad about something that happened to me in college, or I had, I'm acting as though, I was thrown into a Nazi death camp because, somebody broke his word to me. We tend to sort of exaggerate these things and to escalate them in a way that is very obvious. Well, your trick, when you say these things out loud, you're like, oh yeah, I'm being very petty. Yeah. But when it's just in your own head, you can really convince yourself of stuff.
Yeah, that is one of my best tricks for me.
It is
to just say it out loud.
No, it's true for all of us. It is when you're just ruminating. I'm driving around in the car and just getting mad about something that happened. And I can catch myself, and I'm just thinking, I'm way more mad about this than this deserves. Mm-hmm. Not that whatever, I wasn't mistreated. I'm not saying that, everything was just fine with what happened, but my goodness, is it really worth this kind of anger? When I really think about what it cost me, let's just say, so I got ripped off one time for almost $1,000 on a deal. And, that stings. It's $1,000. But, time goes by. What's $1,000? Really, when I think about what Mrs. Kirk's going through, right? When I think what the martyrs went through, when I think what Jesus endured, and, here I am 20 years later and I'm mad about $1,000. I waste money all the time. I've wasted a lot more than $1,000, and, things need to be let go. But in my own head, in the kind of privacy of my sin and ego, I can just work myself into thinking, that $1,000 was an injustice that, the ground ought to be crying out for, like, Abel's blood. and it's totally not, right? It's completely not. And, and that's like that's probably one of the more egregious things I've suffered. Most of the things I suffer, I've been very, I'm not strong enough to suffer worse things because God hasn't given them to me. Yeah. So,
this is actually what's helpful in confession too, to say things out loud.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because then you get someone who can actually respond and ask you questions about it.
Well, and again, in just the act of saying it out loud, you find yourself modulating.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you're like, well, I'm not going to say quite what I was thinking because I just know. I'm ashamed. I don't mean that. No, that's not a false confession.
No.
You're because in the act, you're actually conforming yourself closer to the Word of God and realizing that, you're overreacting.
Yeah. Yeah. When someone cuts me off, and I get mad, you're mad right now because someone cut you off and probably accidentally.
Right.
You've done that 100 times.
Oh, I know.
Just chill.
Yeah, just chill. And again, we're not saying that, it's not to pretend like these injustices don't matter at all. It's simply to put them in context and recognize that we are living in God's mercy and we don't really deserve any justice.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, we're not going to let anyone else but us control our emotions.
Yeah. Well, and you have this in that Philippians passage, right? That so be anxious for nothing, but right, how instead of being anxious, right, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, right? I mean, gratitude is really cultivating gratitude is a huge strategy for dealing with anxiety, with anger issues, right? With kind of resparking joy. It's like the stereotypical marriage counselor's trick, but it totally works and is a legit technique. And that is, list 5 things that you respect about or admire about your spouse,
Yeah.
And, you don't need a marriage counselor to do that. You could just do it for your own sake. And you could just deliberately say good things and, control. Yeah. So so when people are really going through, terrible difficulties, I used to tell them to read the Psalms because I don't know why I told them that. I didn't know what to tell them. And that's seemed like what everybody said. But I don't tell them that anymore because I think the Psalms aren't that there's danger in the Psalms for people that are angry or depressed. Because the Psalms, of course, contain kind of all of human emotion, and the Psalms have a lot of laments and a lot of, calls for the destruction of our enemies and so forth. And people will sometimes then, if you're reading them, they can be misused by our passions to fuel those things. Mm-hmm. So now what I tell people is read Paul's epistles and cultivate joy and look for things to praise and to be thankful for. Not that they can't read the Psalm. Obviously, they can do whatever they want. But I just think that maybe a focus on doctrinal things and then thinking in kind of doctrinal ways, the way Paul teaches us to think, rather than the Psalms kind of expression of our emotions, is maybe more useful for people who are struggling with emotions. To kind of bring them into control and to conform them. So.
Yeah, I think they serve different purposes at different times, and I'm sure you agree with that. I think the Psalms, because they are so emotional in that regard, kind of raw in that way, kind of serve as a release valve for our own emotions. Like we see our emotions reflected there, and then we see where the psalmist ends up.
Yeah, hopefully that's how it works. I would like to be able to control. I mean, if I could pick the Psalms the person read.
Sure.
But to be sure, I don't want to. I'm not disparaging the Psalms. I do think that sometimes. This is of course born of experience. I have seen people that have become obsessed with certain passages in the Psalter in a way that actually wasn't spiritually healthy. Too narrowly focused and not kind of in the context of the analogy of faith. Now, you could do that with any passage. I mean, that's the wickedness of our souls and how we can abuse good gifts. So I'm not blaming the Psalms. I'm certainly not blaming the Holy Spirit. But I do think that some passages of Scripture are harder to be abused that way than others. So,
So do you think that we should talk about worrying and anxiety as sort of a red flare or a road sign of idolatry and unbelief? This is the indicator light that is saying something's actually wrong inside of you, not outside of you, but inside of you.
Yeah. No, that's good. I like that line. Right. Because I think that's right. We want to say the problems are on the outside. The problem is somebody murdered Charlie Kirk. True, that is a problem. It is an objective outside reality. But as you were saying earlier, right, that guy doesn't get to control our emotions, and that guy doesn't take away the promises of God in Christ Jesus to take care of us and to have taken care of Charlie.
Yeah.
Right.
And to continue to press on to say the needful things that need to be said.
Right. Absolutely. So the problem is that if we're feeling anxious about this, the problem is inside of us. Seems like Luther's greatest fear for himself and for his brothers and sisters in Christ is the sin of despair. Mm-hmm. Right. And this is probably, very autobiographical for him, but right. That is what he sees as actually kind of the most tempting misbelief that will destroy faith kind of the quickest, that which is most antithetical to the gospel, which is itself a vehicle of joy. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and hope. Gerhardt defines hope as, this is great, as the kind of ability and willingness to endure evil. Mm-hmm. And I think this is, we tend to use the word hope as kind of, a positive, right? Oh, well, I'm hopeful, I think things are going to get better, and that ought to be kind of motivating. And I don't think that's false. But I think, the fact that we're expecting things to get better means they're not better now, mm-hmm. right? And so I think sometimes we don't realize that actually, in despair or in sloth even, we've actually given up hope. We don't really expect things to get better, or we are refusing patience, right? Mm-hmm. We do not want to wait. We're sick of waiting and kind of temper tantrum rebellion, saying to God, nope, if you did, I need to be happy right now. And mm-hmm. you owe me happiness. You said I'd be happy. And therefore, I give up.
Yeah.
So this kind of ability to endure evil is something I think we could talk more about. And we talk about enduring. You and I think at least have talked, quite a bit about enduring hardship, mm-hmm. And doing difficult things and grit and so forth. But maybe we need to frame it more in actually enduring injustice.
Yeah.
Not just lack of pleasure or difficulties, but actually suffering injustice and doing so in a Christ-like manner that is hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is the sort of patience that Jesus displays, right?
Right.
That when he's before the Sanhedrin, he answers them not a word. He remains silent, right?
Right.
That's that whole. Is that 1 Peter or 2 Peter where he did not exchange
for the joy that was? Yeah. I don't know.
He did not exchange reviling for reviling.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Yeah.
So what are you going to focus on?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's such a huge topic.
Yeah.
We haven't said this yet, so we'll just, we do have 1 Peter 5, 6-7. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your cares upon him. Right? I mean, we have all of this casting our cares upon. I mean, that is the sort of positive side of this too, that we can let go of these things, and we are doing this to ourselves. And,
Well, how do you cast your cares upon him?
You humble yourself. So, maybe you say, well, I got cut off in traffic and that wasn't quite right, but, I don't really deserve better. Mm-hmm.
Like the Dave Ramsey, when people ask, how you doing? He says, better than I deserve.
Better than I deserve. I mean, I don't want to say, my husband beat me and I don't really deserve better. I mean, we got to be careful with that. But there is this sense of humbling ourselves and saying, I do believe that God does know what's best, and I don't like what's happening now, but I trust in him to be working it together for good and to bring me through it and to bring me to the promise of life everlasting, right? So I can endure this.
So maybe there is, in that humbling yourself, casting your cares on to him, part of that is doing your own analysis inwardly. What have I not been doing? Or what have I been doing that's contrary to the word?
Right.
And so
how do I
not
learn
that this is punishment, but it is the discipline of the Lord to say, wake up because you're on this trajectory. That kind of humbling.
Yeah.
So with regard to our own nation, after last week's events, there has been a lot of like surprise. And I remember talking about like, why are we surprised? Like we've been teaching people since 1971 that the way to solve our problems is to kill it.
Yeah.
If there's something that makes us feel uncomfortable or might cause us difficulty or guilt or shame, that we just have to cut it out or cut it off or mutilate it in some way. Maybe this is showing us in a mirror our own problems that we have failed to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a happy indictment against. No, I mean, but I think, also, we should not think that these things are strange when the fiery trial comes upon you.
Yeah.
Why did we think that the devil would leave us in peace? And,
what did you expect?
Right. And I mean, again, look, I'm not casting any aspersion on the people who are distraught and upset and in pain about this. Certainly not, his family members.
Sure.
But I do think we have to recognize this. We shouldn't think it's strange either when our grandfathers die of old age.
Right.
And yet we often do. I mean, so there is this kind of rebuke that I think we all need. That
what is with that we, especially as Christians, that we are still surprised by death?
I think some of it's because death isn't natural. We weren't made to die, and it is like I don't. No one dies willingly in my experience. No one just like, I'm ready to go, I'll go. I mean, they might say that because they want to be free of pain or they might be tired. But then when it actually comes, it's ugly and there's a struggle. That's my experience. They don't just quietly go. There's a gasping. There's just a biological urge to stay alive. And I think this is because death is the ultimate violence, right? The last enemy. Yeah. And God uses it for gain, and for us in Christ Jesus, it's a passage into life and all of this. But it is still a kind of violence that has to be endured, at least until Jesus comes again. So, why is it a surprise? I think in some ways it should be a surprise because your grandfather was meant to be alive. And he is still alive, but he's been taken from you. And that is unnatural and is kind of shocking to the system. I mean, intellectually, we know better, but kind of spiritually, we're reeling from this. At the same time, that's why we live by faith. And we say, it's one of my favorite things, right? Oh, death, where is thy sting? When it's so obvious where right? Yeah. It's so obvious where death's sting is. It's all around us. We feel it deeply, and yet we sort of refuse to admit it in some sense because we're going to say, nope, I do feel it, but my feelings aren't what's real. What's real is what God has promised, and death has been defeated, and it has lost its victory and its sting, and Jesus lives, we're going to live. This is really a blip of time that isn't going to last. And, right. Yep. Yeah, I like to pull this when I'm trying to do hard things, which I should try more often. But I'll often just say to myself, well, it's 5 more minutes. I can do anything for 5 minutes. Yeah. Well, that's obviously a lie. I can't hold my breath for 5 minutes. I can't, right? And 5 minutes could feel like eternity, in some ways. But, it's just kind of one of these mantras that I'll do to myself. I can do anything for a half hour or whatever I'm trying to accomplish. And that's sometimes I think kind of a similar sort of thing. I will do that to myself when I'm sort of sad, I'll be like, well, I'm sad right now, but I can be sad for 5 minutes. I mean, what's wrong? Do I have to be happy all the time? And of course it's more than 5 minutes, But from a point of view of eternity, it's less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, so I find that helpful. I think that's part of casting our cares upon God, believing in eternity, insisting on his word, not allowing, again, kind of the devil's lies or our emotions to define reality, but to actually define the word of God does define reality and establishes reality. So that's what we insist on.
So bringing the head and the heart together.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ruled. I mean, again, right? Everything is the word for us, really.
Yeah. Well, that's good stuff. So next week we get to Trinity 16.
Yeah, we're winding down, aren't we? We're getting close to the end. How many are there? How many Sundays are there this year? Do you know?
I haven't looked, actually.
I mean, there can't be 10 more, can there? Are we going all the? Well, I mean, because we'll do a skip. We won't go straight through to 26. That's what I meant, I guess. How many are we skipping?
That I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll pick up with 16 next week.
All right. Thanks.